Hi, I'm Stu Rose. We've been asked to do some blog postings in video format so that people could relate to what we're doing in a little bit more personal way. And I'd like to have a little overview in this video. And for us, it began about 30 years ago. We were doing strategic planning for many of our clients, and as part of that, we had to do market research to see what trends were happening. The daily news has events, and if we begin to look at events in a row and I see 27 dots, I can tell you where the 28th and 9th are going to be. We begin to see a trend. And what I started finding in the 80s was that we were in trouble in many areas. For example, 90% of the ocean's fish are fished out. That's huge. And I'm wondering, how do you fish out an entire ocean? And yet we were doing it. And when I see multiple information sources that are saying the same thing, I've been finding they've been very, very reliable. There's a lot of issues that all of us face in the world, and this is one we thought, well, why don't we take a little bit of a crack at this one? And I am an architect by training, and I know a lot of people because of our consulting work that are excellent specialists in what they do, and so we thought, let's create a community that is totally sustainable. Well, then what do we mean by sustainable? To me, the big picture is sustainable means we can live with what comes to our building site 100%. And that means with the sun, with the rain, with wind, with soil, with everything that comes to our building site. And what I found since we've been doing this is that it really isn't all that difficult. I'll give you a definition of sustainability to begin with. And I think some about Bermuda. If you haven't been there, every building is required to have a cistern. And when it rains, there's a wash on the roof that gets rid of toxins, and the water goes into a cistern, and people bring it back into their building for their use. If a cistern goes dry, you call for the water truck, and it happens for most homes about once a year, and the water truck comes and refills your cistern, but the rate at which the water truck takes water from their aquifer is less than the rate at which the aquifer recharges, which means Bermuda can go on indefinitely with regard to water. And that's what I call sustainable. Net zero, meaning 100% plus storage, because it might rain at 3 in the morning when you don't need the water, so you put it in a cistern and you bring it back when you get up and you need water for bathing and eating and all the other uses that we have. At the end of 12 months then, our use should be zero. We take care of 100% of what comes to our site. And then I found that there are different dimensions of sustainability. For instance, passive solar buildings have been around for many, many years in our country. John Denver had one just outside of Denver. And that's in heating, but they didn't generate their electricity. They didn't take care of their water. So what we have to do is start saying, well, what are all the dimensions? There's heating, there's cooling, there's water, there's electrical power, there's wastewater, there's air quality, there's food. And so what we started doing was listing each of those, and we found a specialist in each of those areas and said, let's see what we can create to be as sustainable and as many dimensions as possible. Words like environmentally friendly, green, they're not measurable. And a lot of people use those because they want to seem like they're being earth-friendly, and yet they don't want to really change their corporations. And so they will say, well, it's not real and all, but we are environmentally friendly, we're green. And I like net zero because it is measurable. When somebody says our buildings are net zero, that means they can live 100%. The only other question I would ask is, in what regards? So for instance, in our initial community here, we did hire a farmer last year to maximize food production on the site, because that will be the biggest problem in sustainability. And yet we are not 100%. So I will not declare us to be net zero with regard to food. With heating, with cooling, with power, with water, yes, I can declare that we are. Another thing about sustainability that I've learned is there's the physical side, which I've just mentioned, but there's also the non-physical side. If we can take care of our heating, cooling, water, food, and yet we're miserable, I think that's surviving but not sustaining. I think sustaining has to include a quality of life experience. And I think a lot of people think if we're going to live with the earth, we're going to be living in caves. And I'm thinking, no, not really. Our garden atrium here is technically a heat sink. The sun comes in, it heats the center, the rooms go around the atrium, and as you can see, we planted a lot of tropical plants in it. And what I found is that the plants right around me, for example, are birds of paradise. And with these huge leaves, they soak up carbon dioxide and they emit a huge amount of oxygen. We have an oxygenated environment. Our carbon dioxide levels are the same as outside air, and our oxygen is 2 to 3 times higher than outside air. Every resident in every one of our garden atriums has lost their allergies within 3 days, and yet you never read about air quality when it comes to sustainability literature. And so I think what we need to have is something that lives with the earth and gives us equal to or greater enjoyment in our daily lives than we've ever had before. And in future postings, videos, I'll get into some of the details. I'd love to share those with you as well.